So before we kickstart with the session, for all the new entries, I would like to explain what Creator Tech Connect series is all about. So this is a month-on-month free webinar that we conduct in order to explore all the technical nuances that we have in the Creator platform. So let me introduce myself. This is me, Deepika Prabhakaran from the Zoho Creator training team. I would like to outline few housekeeping rules during the session where all the attendees will be on mute throughout the session. If you have any questions that populates in your mind, please access the question tab and post all your questions so that none of your questions will be missed and all of your questions will be answered. And if you find any interruptions in between the session, or if you want to rewatch the entire session, do not worry. A recording of this session will be sent to all the registrants. And I request you all to keep the session interactive by taking part in the polls and the survey. So this session is about the product release updates part 1, where we are really dedicated in keeping our users updated about all the new features and the enhancements that we have in the Creator platform. In that note, we have planned a two-part series in order to explain about the product release updates, where part 1 is today and the part 2 will happen on July 25th, which is by the next week. So let's take a look at the agenda so that we'll get to understand what do we have in store for today's session. So today we are going to take a look about the new features like the batch workflows, custom APIs, and the device type Deluge variable. Followed by, we will also take a look about the enhancements that we have, which is the schedule settings in the environments and the contextual authorizations in live mode, where all these sessions will be having a live demonstration and each of the topic will be wrapped by the key pointers. Now, getting started with the session where we are going to start with the batch workflow. So batch workflow will help us to understand how to split a bulk data into small and manageable chunks so that each of these batches will run individually and then also in an efficient manner. So this illustration will help us to understand how a bulk data is broken into small manageable batches. When we talk about the batch workflow, the first thing that comes into our mind is efficient handling, where we will apply batch workflow for large amount of data or for the repetitive tasks. And this will help us to divide the large volume data into small manageable batches, and then as these batches will run individually, then there is no need for constant monitoring or constant human intervention is required. And then we can also schedule our execution like at a certain period of time or at a regular interval. So this is a small introduction about the batch workflow. Now, when we talk about the batch workflow in Zoho Creator, so usually in the workflows, we will get to automate or we will get to optimize certain process that is happening in the organization using our application with some custom actions or with some predefined actions. Now, in that note, we already have so many workflows. Now, what is this batch workflow? Batch workflow in Zoho Creator will help us to overcome the execution limit that we have when we write the Deluge scripts. So we are going to write the Deluge scripts for the large volume of data at two instances during the time of input or during the time of scheduled intervals. Like we can schedule a time and then we can make the batch workflow run on that respective time. As I mentioned earlier, the batch workflow will divide the bulk data into small batches, where we can start dividing the batches right from 10 data in a batch to maximum of 1,000 records in a batch. So as I mentioned earlier, that they are going to run individually and then also in an efficient manner. So we have an execution section where we'll be configuring all our actions for the batch workflow. So let's take a look at the stages that we have for the batch workflow. First is before execution. So if you want certain actions that has to happen before the execution, then we can configure those actions in the before execution section. And then if we want to perform few actions during the time of execution, then we can write that in the during execution section. Followed by, if you want to write any success or failure action after the session, after the batch workflow, then we can write that in the after execution section. So these are the different stages that is involved in the batch workflow. Now let's go into the live demonstration where we will get to understand how to create a batch workflow and for what instances are we creating a batch workflow. So let me take you to the creator platform. So we know the creator platform will look like this, where we'll have three different sections towards the left hand side, which is develop, deploy, and manage. And these are the applications that I have built using the creator platform. So for the batch workflow, I have taken a use case of an organization called Zilker Furnitures and Electronics. So this is basically an home appliance store that sells furnitures and electronics, and this organization is going to provide discounts on all of their products on a season basis. For example, they have categorized the season as Diwali sales, summer sales, New Year sales, December sales, etc. And for each season they have mentioned certain discount percentage like 25 percentage, 50 percentage, or 30 percentage on all the products that is available in their store. So this is what the Zilka Furnitures and Electronics is doing. Now what are we going to do using the batch workflow is excuse me. So using the batch workflow, we will write a code so that on let's keep it as this way. So let me just go into the module and I'll explain you. So as I mentioned, we have different seasonal discounts that will be available in the seasonal discounts module, and the product details will be available in the product details module. Orders form is for the salesperson who is going to enter the order from the customer, and then I have a product subform that I have embedded inside the order form. So in the seasonal discounts, let me just go into the report. Over here, they have mentioned from which date to which date is the Diwali sale. Similarly, they have mentioned for all other sales, like for the summer, for the Christmas sales, and for the New Year sales, and they've also mentioned the discount percentage. Now, every time in the product inventory, they every time when they upload certain number of products, then based on the current date, the discount percentage will be automatically applied. So this is one way of applying the discount using the batch workflow. And the other way is, if they are not importing the data and they are just manually entering the data in the product details, then every day you can schedule a time. On that particular time, the schedule may run, and it will apply the percentage to that respective product. So let me just go into the product details form. Over here we can basically enter the product details, like we can choose the category they belong to, and the product name, the description, the selling price, and the season. So discount percentage will be applied when the batch workflow runs. So let me go into the report. Over here, if you see, so based on the date, this is 11th July, where in the seasonal discounts for the July month, this has a season called summer season. So I have written a workflow which will happen on every day 2:30 p.m. So in that time, what it will do is it will go cross check the date, and then it will apply the discount percentage. Once the discount percentage is applied, then I have given a formula field so that this will automatically calculate the price after the discount, and the season will also appear here because I've written a workflow in that way. I hope this is clear. And the order form is very simple, that the salesperson will get a data, will get the customer details, and then once they choose the product name, the category, and the selling price will automatically appear. The selling price over here will appear based on the product's price after the discount, so that the salesperson do not have to keep checking what is the discount that is currently going on in the store, because the discount percentage will be automatically applied in the product inventory itself. So this is all about the Zilker furniture. So what I'll do is, let me duplicate this tab. So this tab, I'm going to keep it for the live mode, and then let me go into the edit mode of the application towards the right hand side top. And then here I'm moving to the workflow section. So over here, if you see, we have form, workflow, schedule, approval, payment, blueprints, and here we have our new feature, which is a batch workflow. Let me click on that. And as I mentioned earlier, I've written a workflow that has to apply the discount on schedule basis. So these are three different stages: before execution, during execution, and after execution. So in before execution, we can declare the variable. So these variables will help you to hold the values. So over here, I've created two variables, which is season ID and the seasonal discount. The season ID and the seasonal discount, I'm fetching it from the seasons form, from this form basically, and then I'm storing them inside a variable. Then in the configure action, let me go inside. So over here, I have a collection variable called season. Then I have fetched it from the seasonal discount form. On what criteria am I fetching? The current date has to be greater than or equal to the start date that they have given in their reports, and also the current date has to be lesser than or equal to the end date. On that criteria, I'm fetching the season. So seasons over here, I'm fetching it and I'm storing it inside a variable called season ID. In order to call these variables, we have to use a keyword called input. Okay, so we are basically aware of this keyword input that will help us to fetch and play with the data that we have inside a form. So the same keyword we are using in order to use this variable. So this season ID will basically have everything. Season ID is a record ID, right? So for that respective season, it will have all the records. And then we are fetching the season's discount and we are storing inside a variable called seasonal discount. So these are just two variables that I've created, and I've fetched two values, which is the season ID and the season discount, and I'm storing inside the variable. I hope this is clear. Now next, in during action. So during action, we can execute the action for different number of blocks, like where starting from 10 records, 50 records, 100, 500 and 1000 records. So you can choose how many records you want to run per batch, and then you can write your action. So over here, I have made it really simple for the demonstration purpose, that whatever I have it in my variable, which is the season ID and the seasonal discount, I'm just applying, or I'm just pushing those values inside the fields that I have over here in the product details. So these fields, I'm pushing the season and the discount the discount percentage. So that's what I've mentioned here. So as I'm using these fields from the form, which is the season and the discount percentage, I've used the keyword called input. And then these keyword input over here, that is in order to use that variable. So let me just write this workflow all over again, but we are going to write it for on input. Let me also show you how am I keeping a track for all these workflows. So I will just go into the dashboard. I'm on a different tab, going into the creator dashboard. I'll go into operations and then I'll go into logs. So I'll click on view logs, where I have to choose the respective application and click on view. So I have written this workflow. Let me just show you here. So I've written this workflow that has to run every day at 2:30 p.m. So over here in the logs, you'll be able to see right from 8th July, right from 8th July, the batch workflow is running. It says successful for 2:30 p.m. Again, it automatically runs on 9th July. And then it says successful. Similarly, it has run for 10 July as well. Then it says successful. So every time when your batch workflow is initiated, it will show the log. When it is in progress, it will show the log. And then once it is successful, it will show the log. So this is how you can track your batch workflow in the logs. So now let me just go into the creator platform and then I'll click on done. So now I'll give you a brief demonstration how to create a batch workflow. So this is done for on schedule. So let me just click on new batch workflow. I'm going to apply the new batch workflow for the product details form. So let me keep it as product details. And then I'm going to choose it for on input. So every time when they have a sheet of products and the cost price and the category, when they import, then directly the percentage will be, the discount percentage will be applied based on the current date. So I'm going to name this as apply discounts on input. Now I'm going to run this process always. So if you want to run it on any specific condition, then we can choose on a condition. So now for the demonstration purpose, I'm going to keep it always, and then I click on create batch workflow. So once I click on create batch workflow, it will not directly take you to all the stages. In order to kickstart with writing your script for all the 3 stages, we have to first add a new action inside the during action section. So just to kickstart, I'm keeping an info. I'm just using an info where I just write apply discounts and then I close it with the semicolon. So once I'm done in writing a script inside the during section, I'll be able to see the before and the after. So now let's define variables. I'll click on define variable and then I'll click on manage variable. Over here towards the right hand side, we have a pop-up that will help us to create variable. So first, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to create 2 variables. One is to store the season ID, because based on the season ID, I can fetch the season, I can fetch the percentage, everything. So first, I will choose the number data type, because the season ID is a record ID basically, which is of a number data type. And I'm going to name that as ID underscore season. And then I click on add. Next, I'll click on add variable, where I'm going to choose another data type, which is decimal, because the percentage field is of decimal data type. So I'm choosing decimal. Over here, I will write percentage underscore season. So these are 2 variables that I'm creating in order to store my value, so I can use that variable anywhere in my script. So I do not have to fetch them again and again. So I can fetch and store it in my variable, where I can use them wherever I want in my script. So that's the purpose of variables over here. Next is we are going to fetch the data. So I'll click on configure action. I'll click on add new action. Let me zoom in this. So I'm going to fetch the data, where I just write fetch records. I will be able to see the syntax for that. Now let me just write a variable called season details. And then I'm going to fetch it from a seasonal discount form. So I'll choose a seasonal discount form. So the criteria, we have to be really careful, because we have to write a criteria where the current date has to be equal to or greater than the start date, equal to or lesser than the end date. Only then we can find the proper current date. So over here, I'm going to select the start date. Over here, I'm going to give lesser than or equal to Zoho dot current date. This will help me to fetch my current date, and then I'm going to write another criteria. So I will write and operator. Then I will choose the end date. The end date has to be greater than or equal to Zoho dot current date. So now, based on the current date and based on this respective criteria, it will fetch the data. So now what we have to do, we have to store these data inside the variable. So as I mentioned earlier, we have to use this input keyword in order to use those variables. So first variable is ID underscore season. So this is my collection variable. This will have all the details that is available inside the seasonal discount form, where that will also have the ID. So over here, I'm going to get that seasonal details using the dot function. I will get the ID. And I'll close it with the semicolon. So now why am I getting the ID? Why am I not directly getting the season? Over here in the product details form, so I have given the season. This is in the lookup form. So if it is in the lookup, if it is a lookup field, this will basically have a data type of big int, right? Because that is the record ID. Over here, we are looking up these details of the sales. I'm sorry, the season names, but the backend it is basically a record ID. So for that, I'm fetching the season ID and I'm storing it inside a variable. Next is I'm going to have another variable to store the percentage, the discount percentage. So that is percentage underscore season. That is my variable, and inside a collection called season details dot discount. So now I'll close it with a semicolon. So we have fetched the details and then we have stored it inside a variable. Now I'll click on save and then let me close this. So we are done in creating the variable and also fetching the details and storing inside the variable. Over here, by default, the execution will be on 1000 records, which is the max. So you can choose for how many records you want to play with. I'm going to choose it for 100 records over here. Now I'll click on the edit. I'll remove this because we have just given this to kickstart the writing. Over here, we have the values inside the variable. Now we are going to push those values inside the field. So I will write input dot, the field is season. So I'm going to push whatever is there inside id underscore season, and I'll close it with a semicolon. And now next is input dot, the discount percentage equals to input dot percentage underscore season. So these are the field link names that we have, and then these are the variables. So as the variables also need to be called using the keyword input, I'm using input on both the sides. Now I'll click on update and then I'm going to close this. So if you want to write any success action, like if you want to send any notification or send email, send SMS, post the successful actions of your batch workflow, then we can configure that. Even the failure actions we can configure here. So once we are done with this, I'm going to click on done. So I've created a workflow. This is enabled, and then this is going to happen after successful input. So now I'll go in here. I'm going to go into the all products. This is my report. Over here, I'll click on this icon where I'm going to click on import. I have a sheet with the data that has the product name, the category, and the selling price. So I'm going to import that. This is the sheet. So let me try to open the sheet. So this is a sheet that basically has the selling price of the product name, and the product category that it belongs to. So now I'm just going to click on import. So the data got imported. Now I'll click on access the application. So once I import the data, it is not going to reflect here immediately. Let us go and check it inside the logs first. So meanwhile, it will take some time to look. So I'm just reloading it one more time. I'll go into the logs and then I'll choose the Zilker Furnitures and Electronics. I'll click on view. And then, so over here, if you see the log, it says batch workflow execution has not been initiated yet. So which is for on import, and the type of workflow is also mentioned. So let me just reload it one more time. So if you see here, I've reloaded it. Now, based on the time, based on the date, which is 11th July, the season got appended here, and based on the season, the percentage is also here. Now, based on the percentage, my formula field has calculated the price after discount. So this is how your batch workflow will work. So if you have any questions on the batch workflow, please access your question tab and post all your questions. let me just head back to the presentation. Now let's take a look at the key pointers that we have for the batch workflow. So we can create multiple batch workflow for the same form. So for one form itself, if you want to give multiple batch workflows with different conditions or similar conditions, then that is possible. Then, as I mentioned, that you can track the status of your batch workflow in the application log, whether it got initiated or it got failed or it is there is some error. So it will show all the status in the logs, which is under the operations section inside your creator platform. And then we can set the batch size right from 10, 50, 100 to 1000 records based on your requirement. Next is the execution timeout for each batch has been set to 1 minute. If one batch got failed, and it'll skip the batch and it'll run and it will start running the next batch. So this is how the batch workflow will work. The ideal aim of bringing up a batch workflow inside Creator is in order to overcome the limitation that we have for writing the Deluge script. So I hope the batch workflow is pretty much clear. Now, moving on to the next topic, that is the custom API. So custom API is basically a do-it-yourself API. So we already know that we have an API in the creator which is called as the developers API, which is a RESTful API that will help us to have an interface with or have an interaction with the applications that is inside the creator platform. But though we have the developers API, now why custom API? Let's take a look at the custom API so that we'll get to understand what is the difference and what is the purpose of the custom API in Zoho Creator. So before that, let's have a quick glance what is API. So where API stands for Application Programming Interface, this is a set of tools that will help us to communicate between two system softwares. So the classic example that we have for the API is when you just walk into the restaurant, there'll be a person who will get the order from you in the table, and then the order will be informed to the waiter. The waiter will go and inform the respective order to the chef in the kitchen. And once the order is ready, then the order will be sent to the waiter. The waiter will be giving the order back to the respective tables. The similar way, we have the API as a middleman. So once you raise any request or make any search through your application, then it is API who is going to fetch the information from the respective server, and then it will give it back to us through the application. So let's understand this with an example. That let's take that we have a weather forecasting application. Like if you're going to search for weather of any respective country or any city, then it is API who is going to fetch the data from the database or from the server, and then it is going to give us back in the application. So this is about the API. Now, as I mentioned, we have the developers API. What the developers API will do is it is a singular action that you can perform the CRUD operations, like you can create, read, update, and delete records based on the records that is available inside the create. But if you want to perform any custom functions, then we have to make multiple API calls. So to overcome that, we have this custom API, which is basically a do-it-yourself API, where you will be creating the endpoint URL, and you can customize the endpoint URL, the link name and all. So we'll get to understand that in detail, where the custom API will help the developers to create their own functionalities and expose their functionalities as an API, where this will help us to communicate between two different softwares and also share data. This is also tailor-made. Now, when I say tailor-made, that this will help you to create customized API for your application's requirement. In order to, like, once you create an API that is going to satisfy the application's requirement, then that will in turn increases the user experience. So this is about the custom API. Now let's see what do we have for custom API in Zoho Creator. The tailored functionalities will actually use the existing functions. It may be the functions that is already existing inside your application. So you can write a Deluge function that you really want to expose as a API, where the external platform will be using that respective function to trigger your API call, where the integration is seamless with your third party services. And we have a option called custom API builder, over through which that we will be building the custom API, and we are also going to manage the custom API using the custom API build. Now let's understand this in even more detail, where I've taken an example called project management for the demo for this session. So here the employee will be submitting a proposal using a third party service. So it may be any third party service where the employee will be creating a document for the proposal, and they will be clicking on submit. Once they click on submit, then the document will be sent to the admin, like it may be you who is going to approve or reject that. So once you approve or reject that respective document, then it will be creating a record inside the Zoho Creator, where if you approve the employee's document, it will be a separate record, or if you're rejecting a document based on the reason, it will be into a different document. So this approval, reject, and creating a record can be done by approval workflow that we have in Zoho Creator. So this is basically integrating your third party service with your Zoho Creator, and then you can also create a record inside the Zoho Creator. So let's understand what are the different ways that we have to build custom API. So we have an custom API builder, which is an easy to build interface, and then we can write the Deluge functions, the custom functions, and we can invoke that custom function as an API. So let's understand the components that we have in the API creator. First is the basic inputs. Basic inputs involves where you are going to give a name to your custom API, and we will create a link name along with the description what this custom API is going to perform. Followed by, we will have the endpoint URL created based on your input. So the link name will be attached to the endpoint URL. So if you want any customized endpoint URL, you can give a proper link name that you want to get appended at the end of your endpoint URL. Next is defining the user scope. So what you want to do inside the platform, like you want to get any record, or you want to post any record, like edit or delete any record. So you have to define the user scope. Then we are going to find the request. So we can also customize the request code, that if you have any success code, or if you want any failure code, then that can also be customized. There is also a standard format, there is also a customized format. So we will be seeing that in detail during the demo. Next is function. So once you choose the application for which you are building this API, that will show you what are the functions that is available in that respective application, and you can choose a function for which you want to expose as an API and invoke them later. Then finally, we have the response. Even the response code and the response messages can be customized. So let's see that. Next is let's see what is the flow. So we will be accessing the custom API tab, and then we will be opening the custom API builder. Post that, we will enter the basic details, the request details, and the response details. Once all are done, then we will be selecting the function. Which Deluge function are we going to expose as an API? Post that, we will preview whether the function is working, and then we will save. Finally, we will have an endpoint URL. We will invoke the endpoint URL. So these are the steps that is involved in the custom API. Next is, let's get to understand the steps that we have to create and manage a custom API. So creation and managing the custom API can be done in the custom API builder itself. So first we will create a custom API. Then we can view the API details. If you want, we can just go to the steps back. Like if you want to change any basic details, then you can go back. Change any request details, then you can go back and change the details. Post that, we can manage the custom API. If you want to edit, or if you want to delete or disable, all this can be done inside the custom API builder. Next is we can invoke or you can call the custom API by using your endpoint URL. So these are the steps that is involved in creating and managing the custom API. Now let's go into the live demonstration and then we'll get to understand how to create a custom API and how are we going to expose a function as a custom API. Heading back to the creator platform, let me go to the dashboard. So we have an application called hospital management. Let me say you what this hospital is doing. So this hospital is going to get the patient's vitals through an IoT device. So the integration between the IoT device and the creator is done through the API. Then what is happening is through the smartwatch, when the when the patient's vitals goes abnormal, then there will be a mail that is triggered to the doctor that they have been associated to. So that doctor will quickly make an appointment or will suggest what is the best advice that can be done in order to bring down the vitals to a normal level. So this is what is basically happening. And let's go into the hospital management application. So let me just explain you the modules that we have. We have a doctor modules where you're going to enter the doctor details. So inside the doctor modules, we have I have given only two doctors, and then in the patient's module, we can enter the patient details. I have the patient details associated with the respective doctors, and then if you want to book any appointment, then we can choose the patient, choose the doctor, and book the date. The health records is something that once the patient vitals goes higher, then once you invoke the API, like once API call is triggered, then the record will be saved over here. Next is the SOS response. So SOS responses is excuse me, this is something the doctor will be filling once they receive the mail. Like they will choose the date, they will choose the patient, and they will choose their name, and then they will be receiving their vitals via mail. So they will enter these details, and then if they will suggest what is the current note, like what can be done in order to bring down the vitals, or if the appointment is required, then they will choose the appointment needed and they will click on submit. So this is what the application is basically doing. Now what I'll do, let me just go into the edit mode of the application and I'll show you which function we are going to expose as a API. So we have a function called alert doctor. This function performs basically four steps. That is, first it will fetch the assigned doctor's email, because once the patient's vitals goes higher, then based on the patient's email, the associated doctor's email will be fetched and it will be stored inside a variable. Then whatever readings that is there based on the IoT device will be inserted into the response, and then a mail will be triggered to the doctor based on the vitals. What are the vitals that went abnormal? Based on the vitals, then the mail will be triggered to the doctor, and then the details will be added inside the health record. So once all the functions are done, once all these steps are done, then the return or the response will be reading sent, your doctor will get back to you shortly. So this will be the response. So this is a function that we are exposing as a custom API now. So let me just keep this function, and then I'll go to the dashboard. So we all know the custom API is inside the microservices. So under the develop section, we have the microservices. I'll click on microservices. We have different microservices that is available in the Zoho Creator, where I'll choose the custom API. Now over in here, we are going to create a new custom API. So I'll click on create new, choose custom API. Now here we have the inputs. That is the basic details, request, response, actions, and summary. So let me write the basic details. Like I'm going to write the name as alert doctor, and the link name will be automatically fetched, like similar to the one that we have it in the fields, right, inside the form, the same way. And we can give the description. So I'm just giving alert doctor based on abnormal vitals. So if you want the link name to be customized, because this is a link name that will be appended to the endpoint URL in your API. So if you want to customize that, then we can edit that. Now I'll click on next. Over here in the request, we are going to choose what request are we going to make. Are we going to get the record, post the record? What are we going to do? So over here, what are we doing? From the IoT device, we are going to get post the records inside the creator. So I will choose post, and then what content type. So is it a application JSON or a multipart form data? Multipart form data means that you will be sending the data in multiple entries, but over here I'm going to send a set of data, like the temperature, what is the temperature, or oxygen level, what is the oxygen level, if it is blood pressure, what is the blood pressure. So I'm going to send the details uh, like in a JSON format. So I'm choosing the application or JSON format. So based on your requirement, we can choose. Next is the argument type. How are we going to pass the argument? So I'm not going to pass it as an entire JSON, where I'm going to keep it as the map data type, which is like the key and the value pairs, where it will have a key as the blood pressure and the value will be whatever the vital is. So I've chosen key and value. If you want to add any additional layer of security, then we can choose that by choosing OAuth, where if you choose OAuth, then it will ask for the user scope, like is it only for the admins or for the selective users. So if you choose selective users, it will choose to what are the users, so you can add your users and customize. But as of now, I'm going to keep it as public key. So these are the requests that I'm giving. Now I'll click on next. So if you want to go back and edit the details, you can still go back to your basic details by just clicking on that, and then you can edit. So now let me just go to the next input, that is the response. So over here you can customize your response. So this will basically return your status code. Here if you want to customize, like you can click on custom, and then you can create your status code. Remember, the status code can range between 100 to 599 and only 3 digits. Your response code has to be 4 digits. Like for example, if I'm going to keep the success status code as 200, and maybe the success message is the response code is 2001, or if I'm going to create like for one success message is 2001, if it is performing another success message in a different way, then I'm going to keep it as 2002. So you can create your like different response codes based on your requirement. If you want to add, then you can click on add and create your status codes and response codes. But as of now, I'm going to choose standard, where standard will follow creators REST API. Let me just show you. So the creators REST API will have this standard code, which has the status code as 200, and the response code over here is 4000. So the message is also here. We are for the demonstration purpose, we are going to follow the status and the response codes that is available in the creators REST API. So like if it is an error, then it is a 404 error with what response code. So this is how the status code and the response code, you can use it in the standard format, or you can go ahead and customize your own status and the response code along with the messages. So let me just head back to the creator platform. So over here I'm choosing standard, where I'm going to follow the creators REST API. I'll click on next. So now we have to choose for which application and for which function will be exposed as a custom API now. The application name is hospital management, and the namespace is smartwatch API. So namespace is nothing but it's like a folder that is going to group your functions. Next is the functions that is available inside the smartwatch APIs will be available, but as I have only one function in there, this has chosen that respective function automatically. Now I'll click on next. Then we will have a complete summary of all the inputs, like it has the endpoint URL, and then it has what method we have chosen, then what is the authentication type, is it OAuth or public key, or and then what key, then which function, what is the argument type, the content, and the response. So if you're okay with all the details, then we can click on save. If not, you can go back and edit whichever details that you want to be edited, and then you can head back and click on save. So now I have clicked on save. So I'll be able to see the entire view where I have my endpoint URL over here, my authentication key, and the public key. So if you see, this is enable. So let me just invoke this API by using Postman, where let me just go to the Postman. I will open a new tab where I'm going to paste the URL. Next is, we know that we have chosen the post method. So I'm going to choose the post method. And then I have the authentication key, which is a public key. So I will write public key. And then we have the key in there. Let me just copy the key and then I'll paste it here. So we are going to pass, like we will be fetching the vitals and then we will be posting that, right? So I will go inside the body, inside the raw format, and then the format is also here: the patient's email, temperature, oxygen, and the blood pressure. I have all these details saved already, so let me just copy that, and then I'll go to this API where I'm going to paste it. So just for the demonstration purpose, let me just change the email ID. So I've changed the email ID. So now the patient email is this, and then the temperature, the oxygen, and the blood pressure. So let's quickly change the blood pressure. So just because we have already invoked the URL, right? Just to show a difference, I've changed the email, the temperature, oxygen, and the blood pressure. Let's invoke this. I'll click on send. Now if you see, it shows the result as reading sent. Your doctor will get back to you shortly. If you remember, this is what the return that we have given in the function, and the code here is 3000. Now let me just head back to the creator platform and then I'll click on done. Now over here, let me go into the health record. I'll access this application. And now I'll go into all health records. So this is what that we have invoked now, where the patient name is given, the doctor name is given, and the readings is also mentioned. So this is how the custom API will work. Heading back to the presentation. Now, if you have any questions on custom API, you can post your questions. I would request my a co-trainer to share this link, which will have step-by-step instructions like how to configure the custom API and what are the steps to create and manage your custom API, and if you want to edit and draft, how to do it. All the steps will be mentioned inside this document. So you'll be getting this document in the chat. You can access the document and get yourself familiarized with all the steps in order to create a custom API. Next is to the key pointers. So you can create a custom API link by only using the underscore, where we cannot give space and we cannot use any other special characters that's been mentioned here. And then the status code will be only 3-digit, that is going to range from 100 to 599. And also the response codes will be 4-digit, which will have a max of 99 and 99, and where it also cannot contain any special characters. If you are creating any custom API and like for example, if you do not have all the details, or if you haven't created any function and you want to keep that saved, then it will be saved as a draft. Let me just head back to the creator platform and I'll show you one. Let me close this. So I'll click on create new. I'm going to create a custom API. So I will write here as alert. So it will fetch the link name. And if you want to customize, you can give the link name. And then I'm just going to paste it for the demo purpose and I'll click on next. So I'm just choosing it as get and keeping it as public key next. So now I have not decided whether to go with the standard or custom. In that case, if I just close this, This will show you a prompt wish to leave. If you click on leave, then that will be saved as a draft. So whenever you have all the details, your function is ready, everything is ready, in that note you can click on draft and you can go proceed with the remaining steps. So this is about the custom API, and if you have any questions, please post them in the question tab and get it answered. So the next new feature that we have is the device type deluge variable. So let's go and see what do we have in the device type deluge variable. This will help us to fetch what device the user is using in order to access the application. For example, like we know that creator caters that whatever application that you build in the creator platform, that we can access in the laptop, in the tablet, and also in the mobile. Now when the user is accessing this in the mobile, then we can able to see what application what device they are using to access the application. Now what's the use of this? So imagine that we have a user is having a shopping application. Okay, so if any of their customers is opening the application in a website, then we can align that application based on the website's dimension. Or if the user is accessing that shopping application in a mobile, then we can align the application based on the mobile's dimension. So this will help us to increase the user experience. The returning will be like, if I'm writing this code, then what will be my return value? Return value will be a string. It will either say it's a web or phone or tablet. Next is we have a syntax. The syntax is Zoho dot device dot type. So it is basically using the dot function. We will write Zoho dot and we will have device dot type will help us to fetch what device the user is using in order to access the application. So let's go into the live demonstration. Here we are in the creator platform. I'm just going into the same application because just for the demo purpose I'm showing. I'll go into the workflow and then I'm going to create a function. I'll click on new function where I will write this as a device type, and then I'm going to keep the language as deluge. I'll choose the namespace as default, and then I'm going to create a function. So let me just click here and then I'll zoom in the screen. I'm sorry. Yeah. So I'm going to write a variable called var1, and we know the syntax. The syntax is Zoho dot device dot type. I'll close it with a semicolon and then I'm going to info this variable 1. So we know what the response would be as I'm using this application, accessing this respective application in a laptop. Ultimately, the output will be web. So if a user is accessing this application in a mobile, then you will be able to see the output as mobile. Okay, so based on the requirement we can write the syntax wherever required so that we'll be able to debug and check what application the user is using, or you can fetch that value and show it in any of your fields so that you'll be able to keep a record how many users are using your application in a mobile or in a laptop or in a tablet. So let me just execute this by saving. I'll save and then I'll execute. So here we'll be able to see the message as web, as I mentioned that I'm accessing this in the laptop. So this is about like once I create one more thing, once I create this function, we can use this function anywhere in your code, or if you want to write it directly in your code, even that is possible. So now heading back to the presentation. Next, moving into the enhancements that we have. The first enhancement that we have is the schedule settings in the environments. We know we have the environments in Zoho Creator, which is 3 different types of environments, which is development, stage, and the production. Where in the development we'll be able to make all the changes, and in the stage we'll be able to test your application, and finally we'll have the live mode that the user will be accessing the application that is there in the production. If you want to manage the schedule limit inside the environment, then in that case we have this new enhancements coming in play, which is the schedule settings in the environments. So let's see what is this. So this will help you to manage the schedule execution for all the applications which is having the environment enabled. We have two options. One is suspend all the schedules. So irrespective whether the schedule is enabled or disabled status, this is going to suspend all the schedules. So you can choose where you want to suspend all the schedules. You want to suspend all the schedules in the development environment, or if you want to suspend all the schedules in the staging environment. So you can choose that, and then we can perform the suspend all schedules. Or if you want a specific schedules to run during the uh, development environment, or during the staging environment, then you can choose application specific. Application specific will help us to run all the schedules that are in the enabled status. So you can choose which uh, environment that you want the schedules to run, and choose which environment you do not want any of your schedules to run. So this will help you to manage the schedule limits inside the environment. So let's go into the live demonstration and I'll show you. I'm going into the creator dashboard. So under the deploy section, I'm going to go into the environments. So I have changes available for an application called order management. So I'll just click on this, where I'll go into the settings of in the development settings, and I'm going into the workflow schedules. So if you want to keep the workflow, if you want to run the workflow during the development, or if you're not going to touch that, like no changes are made in the workflow, so I'm going to suspend all the workflows in this case, then that is also possible. Next is if I want to go into the settings of a staging, then I'll go into settings of staging. Over here, if you want your tester to test any of your application, uh, and then at that respective time you want the schedules to run or not, then you can choose that, and then you can like work accordingly. So this is what the schedule workflows schedules. So the workflow schedule is not available for the production environment, as it is a live mode. So all the schedules that is in the enabled status will work in the production. So coming back, finally we have the contextual authorization in live mode. So this will help us to, like, this will allow your users to authorize the connection. Like if that is a system connection, or if that is a logged in user connection, or if that is a application connection, then the users, once they want to use that respective connection, it will ask for authorization, because according to that respective user, it is an unauthorized connection. So if they are going to access any component, or if they are going to work on any workflow or function or blueprint, they'll have to authorize that. There will be a prompt that will appear, so that is going to ask you, you're going to authorize the connection, then you have to enter the details in that, get them authorized. So over here you have different types of connections. So based on the connections privileges, based on the connections users, you'll be getting it authorized. Let me just show you the different connections. Like if it is an admin connection, only the admin and super admin uh, will be authorizing that. For other users, they have to click on the authorize and then enter the details and get it authorized. Next is the system connection. Only the super admin can authorize. The other users cannot authorize the connection unless and until you're going to enter the details. Next is the logged in user. Any type of users that has been added into the application can access the connection. So let's go into the live demonstration. So first, let me show you how the connections will be. So if you have any connection inside your form, then if that connection is not authorized by you, then you will be able to see this prompt. And once you click on manage connection, you'll be able to see the connections that is available, and then you can click on authorize, where you will be able to enter the details. If you're using any panel that has a unauthorized connection, then you'll be able to see this prompt that says authorize. Again, similar one that we have in the report as well. Even in the live view, you'll be able to see this admin action required. So if you're going to authorize that, if it is an admin connection, or if it is a logged in user connection, or if it is a system connection, whomsoever the privilege is given, they have to they have to authorize the connections. So if I just go into any application, let me just close this. I'll go into environments. I have the order management. Okay, so I'll open this order management. Oh, not this one. Let me open another application. So you'll be able to see all the connections. Like if you have any connections, then inside the application next to your notification icon, you'll be able to see the connections. So once you click on that, I have authorized 2 connections. So if you have any unauthorized connection, that will be appearing here, and it will show a prompt to authorize. So once you click on that, it will ask for the details. You can enter the details and get the connection authorized in order to use the connection. So this is how the authorization in live mode will be there. Now, let's have a quick summary of whatever we learned throughout the session, where we started our session by understanding what is batch workflow, how are we going to like manage a bulk data by breaking them into smaller manageable chunks, and then followed by we also saw what is custom API, which is basically a do it yourself API, how to create a custom API, and how to write a function and expose them as a custom API. Then we also saw about the device type deluge variable, like how this device type deluge variable is useful and how are we going to write the syntax. We saw that as well. Then we had a look about the enhancements, which is the schedule settings in the environments, and also contextual authorizations in the live mode. So for all this topic, we had a live demonstration and then key pointers. I hope this is clear. So please post your questions in the question tab, and you'll be able to get the doubts cleared by the code trainer. So now talking about the upcoming sessions, as we are in the Creator Tech Connect series where the product release updates part 1, as I mentioned at the start of a session, we have a part 2 that is coming up. So this is a recurring session basically. So you, whomsoever is attending this session, will have the registrations available for the next session as well. But if you find any of your friends or colleagues is interested in knowing about the product releases in Creator, then you can scan the QR code, or you can access the link that will be shared by the code trainer in the chat, so that they will be beneficial by understanding about the product release updates that we have in the Creator. Next is the Learning Table series, which is a month-on-month free webinar that we conduct, where in this session, we will be choosing every month one different industry, which is 12-month, 12 industry. On that note, this month, the upcoming month, August, we have Creator for the food industry. So if you are interested in knowing how to use Creator for different industries, then this session will be apt for you, where you can scan the QR code or register yourself for that respective session, or else you can access the link that is available in the chat so that you can register yourself. Or if you find the session will be useful to any of your friends and colleagues, you can share the URL or the QR code to them so that they'll be beneficial out of the session. So let me just keep it for a few seconds so you can scan the QR code. Okay, so next is we have another product called Q Engine, where this is for the testers. Like if you are a tester and you want to know about this product, we have an extensive training that is going to come up by July 15 to July 17, where 3 days, and the training is going to happen 4 hours each day. And here we have the training that we are running for 2 different time zones, which is July 15 to 17 from 1:30 to 5:30 p.m. IST. So if you're interested, you can scan this QR code and register yourself for the APAC and the EMEA session on Zoho Q Engine's online training. Else, if you want to follow in a different time zone, which is going to happen from July 22 to July 24, by 9:30 p.m. to 1:30 a.m. IST. So based on your preferences, you can scan the QR code if you want to know more about Q Engine. So I'll keep this slide for a few seconds so that you can scan and check out the schedule. We have come to the end of the session. Let's close the session here. So before we close the session, I just wanted to say about the online training that we run for the Zoho Creator, which is the online training will happen for two stages: business users and associate developer. So if you are interested in knowing about the online training, you can scan the QR code and check the schedule. The training will happen for 3 days, where 4 hours each. So if you have any queries about the training, you can write to training@zohocreator.com, or certification related queries, you can write to certification@zohocreator.com. If you have any technical queries, we can write to support@zohocreator.com. So thank you so much for your time and patience. Let's meet in another edition of Creator Tech Connect series. Thank you. Bye.